Welcome back guys. LSFG is a universal frame generator that works on any GPU, whether it's from Intel, Nvidia or AMD, it does not matter. It's included with a paid application called Lossless Scaling that sells on Steam Store for around $7. LSFG just received a major update in the form of version 2.3, which introduces X4 frame generation mode that quadruples the FPS by generating 3 intermediate frames. This is the update log. Gsync support is also included. X3 mode has been updated to further reduce artifacts on pattern textures and in dark scenes. In this video, I'll be testing both X3 and X4 frame generation modes on my Windows PC that has an RTX 2070 Super GPU and a Ryzen 5700X 3D processor. My monitor is ViewSonic XG2431, probably one of the best budget IPS gaming monitors, supports up to 240Hz refresh rate, which is ideal for X3 and X4 frame generation modes. The recommended minimum base frame rate for these modes is 60. X3 mode will try to triple the FPS from 60 to 180 and X4 mode will try to quadruple the FPS from 60 to 240. This monitor does not support hardware based Gsync, it supports FreeSync Premium, Gsync compatible. I'll be testing many games. Now I'm recording this video using my mobile phone as I usually record my PC gameplays using Nvidia Shadowplay. It's unable to capture the effect of LSFG. First I'll show you how to enable Gsync. Let's go to desktop. You need to enable Gsync or FreeSync from your monitor's OSD settings. Full HD resolution 240Hz setup menu. This is for my ViewSonic monitor. AMD FreeSync Premium setting on. Now just open Nvidia control panel. Expand display section, then click on setup Gsync. Enable these settings, enable Gsync compatible, enable for full screen mode, enable settings for the selected display model, apply. I'll also enable Gsync indicator. It will let us know whether Gsync is working or not in our games. Just click on display here. Enable this setting, Gsync compatible indicator. I have disabled VSync from Nvidia control panel. Just click on manage 3D settings, global settings, scroll down to the end. Vertical sync off. Will be applying a 60 FPS cap using RTSS. It's running in the background, included with Afterburner 60. I'll enable one more setting. Just go to the desktop, right click anywhere in the blank area, click on display settings, scroll down to the end, click on graphics, then click on change default graphics settings. Make sure VRR is enabled from here. First I'll show you LSFG setting. Just launch Lossless Scaling app. Not using any of Lossless Scaling upscaling algorithms. LSFG version 2.3 frame generation mode X3. Not using its performance mode. It basically offers a slightly worse quality but helps in improving the performance, reduce the GPU load. Clip cursor setting enabled. Sync mode default. Max frame latency value 1 for Nvidia GPUs. Gsync support enable, make sure this setting is enabled. Raw FPS setting enable, capture API DXGI. We are done here. Settings, start as administrator setting enable, hotkey for enabling LSFG, control alt NS. Minimize the application, it works as an overlay. So first I'll be running Resident Evil 4 remake. We'll be showing you the performance metrics using Afterburner overlay. Its frame pacing graph does not work properly when I enable LSFG. It shows spikes even when the game is not stuttering. Here's the Gsync indicator. I'll be using this preset. Won't be maxing out the settings. Prioritize performance. We'll have some free GPU resources for LSFG to work properly. Full HD resolution, 240Hz refresh rate, frame rate unlock, display mode borderless window. FSR2 upscaler set to quality. This game does not support DLSS. Start it. There's Leon. Here we are getting a rock solid 60 FPS. Input response without LSFG. GPU load is within a range of 30 to 40%. It's going to increase when I enable LSFG's X3 or X4 frame generation mode. It will give you an idea about LSFG's performance overhead. No artifacts around Leon's character model. Now I'll enable LSFG's X3 mode. Pressed its hotkey It's working. You can see LSFG's FPS counter in the top left corner. Check out the input response. Wow, can observe the added amount of smoothness. FPS with frame generation is around 180. Controls are responsive. Input delay is not an issue. Minor increase in latency, nothing significant. Okay, I'm observing some fuzzy textures around Leon's character model. Check out the crosshair. It's not flickering. Okay, it seems Leon's gun is flickering. Minor artifact, not easy to observe this. Only observable when you move the camera in complete circles like this. During fast visual motion, game's HUD elements are not flickering. You can definitely use X3 frame generation mode with a base FPS of 60. Now I'll switch to X4 frame generation mode. GPU load is around 70%. Comes with a significant performance overhead. Switch to X4. It's working. Back to the game. GPU load increased to around 87%. FPS with frame generation 240. It's happening. Wow. X4 frame generation mode is definitely smoother than X3 mode. Can observe the extra added amount of smoothness. Maxing out my displays. Refresh it. Okay, there are some fuzzy textures around Leon's character model. They are easily noticeable now. Gun, some flickering is present, nothing extreme. You can definitely play the game with the X4 mode enabled. Base FPS at 60. I just enter the village, engage in combat. Wow, the animation is so smooth. Gsync helps in eliminating screen tearing, producing a very smooth looking animation. Input delay is not a problem. Popping heads. It's truly something else. Very impressed by LSFG's X4 performance mode. Minor graphical artifacts are present. See, when I move the camera quickly like this, some fuzzy textures around Leon. Now I'll be testing the next game. Cyberpunk 2077. I'll switch back to X3 frame generation mode. Games launcher. Here you can see normal is mentioned. This is the Gsync indicator. Of course, Gsync is not working as we have not started the game yet. Okay. Now Gsync is working. In game settings, I'm basically using the high preset. DLSS upscaler enable using its quality preset. Motion blur disabled. Ray tracing disabled. Video settings. Windowed mode. Windowed borderless full HD resolution. Vsync off. I'm standing right outside V's apartment building. Check out the input response. We are getting a rock solid 60 FPS. This game is demanding on both CPU and GPU. GPU load is around 50%. Enough free resources for LSFG to work properly. I'll just enable its X3 frame generation mode. It's working. FPS in the top left corner. 180 with frame generation. Wow, can observe the added amount of smoothness. Again, latency is not a problem with a base FPS of 60, but I am observing some graphical artifacts when I move the camera in complete circle. See, gun is flickering. Crosshair is also flickering. Difficult to observe the artifact when I move the camera at a normal speed like this. You can definitely play the game with X3 frame generation mode. Base FPS 60. No garbled textures around the edges of the display. GPU load increased to around 88%. without frame generation enabled, GPU load was around 50%, almost 37% increase in the GPU load with X3 frame generation mode. Now I'll switch to X4 frame generation mode. Let's see what happens. X4, resume the game. Wow, can definitely observe the extra added amount of smoothness. FPS with frame generation close to 210, but look at the aggressive graphical artifacts. The gun, it's flickering, fuzzy textures around it. So more graphical artifacts with X4 frame generation mode. Yeah, base FPS dropped down to around 54, GPU load close to 92%. X4 mode is more demanding than X3 mode. For this game I would recommend using X3 mode. Depends on your GPU. It seems my GPU is not powerful enough for X4 mode, or I should drop the settings further. I don't want to drop the settings. Game was running very smoothly even with the X3 mode. Okay, let me just enable the performance mode. Let's see if we can get a base FPS of around 60. Enabled. Back to the game. Yeah, GPU load dropped down to around 80%, but the graphical artifacts are still present. Now we are getting around 240 FPS, not bad at all. Okay, I'm observing some garbled textures around the edges of the display. So X3 mode for RTX 2070 Super in Cyberpunk. I'll be testing the next game, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt next generation version. Graphics settings, I'm using the Ultra preset, ray tracing disabled, DLSS of scaler enabled using its quality preset, motion blur disabled. Display settings, full HD resolution, display mode borderless window, Gsync off. There's Carol standing right outside the entrance of Novigrad, getting a rock solid 60 FPS here. Check out the input response. Wow, the camera is flying in this game. Very high sensitivity. GPU load is around 50%. Again, it's perfect for testing LSFG. Get an idea about its performance overhead. I'll enable its X3 frame generation mode. X3 performance mode disabled. LSFG is working. You can see the FPS counter in the top left corner. Now I'll move the camera in complete circles. Oh my god, look at the GPU load close to 90%. X3 mode comes with a huge performance overhead in Witcher 3, and I'm observing some graphical artifacts. Geralt's head is flickering. There's a strip of garbled textures around the bottom edge of the display. Try to showcase it. Sprint around. See? Garbled textures noticeable in this game. These garbled textures are not present around the edges of the display though. Fuzzy textures around Geralt. I'll just switch to the X4 frame generation mode now. X4, it's working. Base FPS 60, FPS with frame generation 240. Oh no, aggressive graphical artifacts, but I can observe the extra added amount of smoothness. GPU load is around 90%, base FPS dropped down to around 50. Sprinting. Garbled textures around the bottom edge of the display and even around the left and right edges of the display with X4 frame generation mode. Latency is not a problem with both of the LSFG modes. Noticeable graphical artifacts. For this game I would recommend using FSR3 mod. Both free and paid mods exist. Even the swords are flickering. When I move the camera in complete circle, I'll just enable LSFG's performance mode. On. With the performance mode enabled, GPU load dropped down from 90 to 80%, 240 FPS with frame generation. Very smooth experience, but look at the graphical artifacts. Oh my god, the fuzzy textures around Geralt are more noticeable now. Now I'll be testing the next game. Not impressed by the image quality here. Elden Ring. I load Shadow of Erdtree expansion. You can use LSFG even with the game's online mode. Pure Dark's FSR3 mod also exists, but it cannot be used with the game's online mode. Game settings, display mode borderless windowed, full HD resolution. I'm using the high preset with motion blur disabled. Here's my character. Here we're getting a rock solid 60 FPS. GPU load is around 60%. I'm in the graveside plain area, big open area. There's castle lenses, the Great Bridge. Okay, now I'll enable LSFG's X3 mode. Performance mode disable, X3. LSFG is working. FPS counter in the top left corner. Oh my god, look at the GPU load. Almost hitting the GPU bottleneck, but the base FPS is still around 60. FPS with frame generation 180. Can observe the added amount of smoothness. Not observing any significant graphical artifacts, yet there is a strip of garbled textures around the bottom edge of the display. Try to highlight it. No garbled textures around the edges of the display, left and right edges. You can definitely use LSFG in this game. X3 frame generation mode with the base FPS of around 60. Heading to castle lenses. Go through the bridge. Keep an eye on the bottom edge of the display. See the garbled strip, garbled textures. Okay, now I'll switch to X4 frame generation mode. This place is heavily guarded. X4. Back to the game. Base FPS dropped down to around 53. FPS with frame generation around 210. Okay. No significant graphical artifacts, I'll be honest. You can actually use X4 frame generation mode on RTX 2070 Super GPU in Elden Ring running at high settings. GPU load is around 93%. That garbled strip of textures is still present around the bottom edge of the display. Not observing any garbled textures around the left and right edges of the display. Some fuzzy textures around the character. This area is very demanding. FPS may drop below 50. Yeah, 47 FPS. Still the game is running smoothly. 190 FPS with frame generation. Engage in combat. Beautiful colors. X3 mode will give you less graphical artifacts. Use the X4 mode if you own a high-end GPU. It's as simple as that. I'll be testing the next game. Epic Games version of Wuthering Waves, version 1.1. I am from India. We'll be using the SCA servers. Just like Elden Ring, this game's FPS is also capped at 60. Graphics settings, display mode full screen. It's basically borderless full screen mode. Full HD resolution. Frame rate 60. Shadow quality set to ultra high. Special effects quality set to medium. LED bias high. Most of the effects are enabled. I'll just scroll down. DLSS disabled. Gsync off. My current location near Kweshi village. There's Rover. Here we are getting a rock solid 60 FPS. Check out the input response. This is the game running without LSFG. GPU load close to 50%. I tested the game day 1 of its release. It suffered from performance issues, shader cache, compilation related stutters. Not happening now. That's good to see. I'll enable LSFG's X3 frame generation mode. Performance mode disable, X3 scale. It's working. FPS with frame generation 180. Yeah, I can observe the added amount of smoothness. Unfortunately, our character is flickering. Minor graphical artifact. Not observing any garbled textures around the edges of the display. Okay. A strip of garbled textures is present around the bottom edge of the display. It's a small strip. but I can definitely observe it from here. You may not be able to observe it. Latency is not a problem. Animation looks so smooth. Gliding. Again, character model is flickering. Engage in combat. GPU load increased to around 80%. Switch my character. Can be done on the fly. Smooth like butter. Okay, now I'll switch to X4 frame generation mode. X4. Back to the game. X4 mode is working. FPS with frame generation around 240. Wow, the game is running so smoothly. GPU load increased to around 93%. Aggressive graphical artifacts. Our character's hat is flickering. These graphical artifacts occur even when I move the camera at a normal speed like this. See? I'm not observing any garbled textures around the edges of the display. Okay, I'll explore the area. First I'll use my glider. Pretty sure character model will flicker. No significant flickering. Show you some combat. Go this way. Big open world. Using an ultimate ability. Rover is flickering. Certain characters exhibit more graphical artifacts, it seems. Ghosting. Now I'll be testing the next game. Last one, Alan Wake Part 2. This game is very demanding on the GPU. I'll be running it at low settings. Display mode borderless. Full HD resolution DLSS enable using its quality preset. Motion blur, film gain and lens distortion settings disabled. Low to medium settings. Ray tracing off. There's Alan. Check out the input response. Getting a rock solid 60 FPS. This is the game running without LSFG. GPU load is around 65%. I'm in the dark place. Will be fighting against some shadows. They are waiting for me. I enable LSFG's X3 frame generation mode. X3 performance mode disabled. It's working. FPS with frame generation 180. Resume the game. Now FPS dropped down to around 166, but it's still running smoothly. Yeah, frame generation is definitely working. I am observing some fuzzy textures around Alan. No garbled textures around the left and right edges of the display. There is a strip of garbled textures around the bottom edge of the display. You can definitely play the game using X3 frame generation mode. Base FPS 60. Base FPS is dropping around 54. Now I'll switch to X4 frame generation. Switched. Back to the game. Base FPS dropped down to around 50. Oh, this mode is really very demanding. Okay, I can observe the extra added amount of smoothness. No significant graphical artifacts. You can actually use this mode in Alan Wake 2 running on RTX 2070 Super GPU, but you have to dial down the settings. I am using the low preset. Latency is not a problem as the base FPS is close to 50. I just switch to the performance mode. It should help in increasing the base FPS. On. Resume the game. Base FPS increased to around 58. Not a big drop in terms of image quality. You can definitely play the game this way. No garbled textures around the edges of the display. Crosshair. It's not flickering. Some fuzzy textures are present around Alan's head when I move the camera in complete circles. Just engage in combat. Ignite my flare. Keep an eye on the base FPS here, drop down to around 50. And this is when I am using LSFG in performance mode. X4 mode is really very demanding. Use it on PCs with high-end GPUs. Not recommended for mid-range GPUs. In terms of latency, not a big difference between X3 and X4 frame generation modes, as the games were running around 60 FPS, 50 to 60 FPS. A modern day mid-range GPU should be able to handle X3 frame generation mode after you dial down a few settings, but minor graphical artifacts are present even using X3 frame generation mode when the games were running at 60 FPS. I hope these issues will be resolved soon. See some garble textures around the shotgun. Gsync works very nicely. Animation smooth as butter, no screen tearing. So that's it with the video guys. I hope you find it useful. Thanks for watching and have a nice day.